What is your building of yours is like? Super successful. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know today. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the CRTPO Technical Coordinating Committee meeting. Today is May 1st, 2025, and the time is now 10:02. We'll start with introductions around the table, starting to my left, and then we'll move into the audience on the left side.
Hello, Rich Hoffman, Iredell County.
Heather Maloney, Town of Huntersville.
Tracy Hauk, pedestrian.
Sophie King, Town of Mooresville.
Matt Kirkendall, City of Statesville.
Emily Hines, Village of Wesley Chapel.
Bjorn Hansen, Union County.
Todd Huntsinger, Indian Trail.
Bryson Hester, City of Monroe.
Andrew Ventresca, Town of Charleston.
Travis Johnson, CRTPO.
Liz Babson, City of Charlotte.
Candace Rory, Charlotte Planning Department.
Dan Lever, Charlotte General Services. Brian Horton Katz with MTC Rep.
Diane Thomas, Public Health Focus Area.
Anil Panicker in CDOD Division 12.
Leo Gatea, Division 10.
Gwen Cook, Greenway.
Aaron Tucker, Town of Cornelius.
Megan Green, Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Dave Campbell, Charlotte DOT Bicycle Focus Area. Happy Bike Month, everyone. It's May. It's National Bike Month, if you didn't know. It's Bike Month here in Charlotte. If you're interested in finding out more, there's a display getting set up in the lobby, so check it out on your way out. And if you say you talked to Dave Campbell at today's meeting, ask him for a lapel pin, just like this one. Thank you.
Andrew Golden, Town of Davidson.
Dana Sujenki, Town of Matthews.
Steve Fry, Town of Mint Hill.
Neil Burke, CRTPO.
Justin Carroll, Charlotte DOT.
Bob Cook, CRTPO.
Rebecca Quinn, Charlotte DOT.
Barton Kidman, Charlotte DOT.
Corey Owens, Charlotte DOT.
Mindy Honeycutt, Messenger Campo Associate.
Matt Hayward, Kinley Horn.
Elizabeth Clever, Emily Horn. Erica Martin, Town of Morrisville.
Scott Miller, NC DOT.
John Todd, Bolton. Robert Allen, fully engaged president. CA for Vincent DOT.
Brian Elhort, CRTPO.
Dan Usual, ISNH. Jennifer Stafford, CRTPO. Ian Thompson, CRTPO. Trying to do something about the warrant approval.
Will Snyder, CRTPO.
Curtis Bridges, CRTPO.
All right, thank you. And again, welcome. Our first item is to adopt today's agenda. Do I have any changes to the agenda as presented?
I'd like to amend the agenda. For the, I put a resolution on everyone's desk to add to the consent agenda, which is to support a bike ped grant application through NCDOT's IMD's planning grant program.
May I have a motion to add that to today's consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, Dana. Now, moving on to the next item, we need to adopt today's consent agenda. Oop, I need to.
So we adopted the agenda with the modification. Brian was first. Andrew was- Okay.
Yes.
We got it.
All right. Now we need to adopt today's consent agenda. That includes now 4 items: the approval of the March 6th, 2025 TCC minutes, the CTP amendment for US 74 and Rocky River Road grade separation, and a request to open public comment period, and the ICATS 2024-2033 TIP amendment And the fourth item that Dana just added to our consent agenda was a resolution supporting the town of Matthews to pursue a pedestrian plan grant through NCDOT Integrated Mobility Division Planning Grant Program. May I have a motion?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. That carries unanimously. We have no action items for today, but we do have 3 information reports. And first, we're going to hear from Neil Burke and Nate Hayward with Kimley Horn.
Morning. So this is just an information report this morning on the status of the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I'll provide a brief overview of where we're at in the development schedule, and then Nat will cover progress that we're making on the roadway ranking process, looking ahead at phase 2 engagement, which we anticipate to start next month, and then some other tasks that we will be working on over the next couple of months. So in the second quarter here of 2025, we have finished the scenario planning effort pretty much concurrent with the roadway project submission process that many of you participated in. We've also completed the revenue forecast for roadway projects. We're working on the revenue forecasts for our non-highway funding sources. Those will be coming to you over the next couple of months. The congestion management process is underway. We have developed the draft congested corridors that we'll be reviewing with the steering and advisory committees this month. And we're in the middle of the project evaluation process, and Nat's going to talk about that today. That'll really be the focus of our presentation. We're getting ready, as I mentioned, for the second phase of public engagement, which will be focused on the draft fiscally constrained project list next month. And then the consultants and staff will be working to prepare the 2055 MTP document. This all culminates in the anticipated action to approve the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan in March of 2026. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Nat.
Thanks, Neil. Good morning, everybody. Like Neil's teed up, we're going to spend most of our time here talking about where we've been going through the roadway project submission process. I think last time we were in front of this group, we were just finishing up that submittal process. We're going to tell you kind of what we've been doing since and what we're looking towards here in the near future. So we really break this submission process down into 3 different parts. So we're already through step 1, where all of your jurisdictions have gone through submitted projects to be included in the evaluation process for the 2055 MTP. That submittal window was early this year, January 13th through February 14th. So if we haven't said it already, thank you all for the time and the effort that you and your jurisdictions, your coordination with your elected officials and other staff took to go through that process and to submit projects. After that, we are simply in that project evaluation phase right now. So really got our sleeves rolled up, reconciling all the submitted projects into sort of a master cleaned up list, and working with a subcommittee of our 2055 MTP, which I'll talk about here in a minute, to actually evaluate those projects, rank those projects, and work towards applying fiscal constraint on the process. So here's kind of a larger look at our overall schedule for this process for the next few months. As I said, we finished up that submittal process in February. So as we moved into March, it was all about evaluation of our first tier of evaluation for all of the projects. After working through that process, there was a set of projects that scored well enough to move on to the second tier of evaluation. And now, as we're sort of ending April, we're starting May. Today is May 1st, if you can believe it. We are working towards applying fiscal constraint to that project list as we finalize those tier 2 evaluations, working closely with our subcommittee here. And as we move into June and July, that's when we'll finalize that draft fiscally constrained project list, and we'll present that to the TCC and the board. And that project list will hopefully go for public comment later this summer. So just a kind of a brief recap of the submissions that we received. In total, we received 216 project submissions for the process, and we sorted all of those into these 5 different STI categories. One for statewide, which is focused on interstates. We have 2 regional buckets. This is Region E, which includes Mecklenburg and Union counties, as well as Region F, which includes Iredell County. And then we also have 2 division buckets. So Division 10 includes Mecklenburg and Union. Division 12 includes Iredell County. And so as we work through the project scoring and the fiscal constraint, we'll use our revenue projections, which we've talked with you guys about, I think at our maybe the last couple times we were here, to compare them against the cost estimations for the projects and essentially provide, budgets for those different STI categories across different horizon year bands. And so that's how we'll apply the fiscal constraint to the projects that were submitted and scored. So I mentioned the 2-tier evaluation system. You guys have probably all seen this before, but just a quick refresher. That first tier is all about evaluating the need for the particular project. And so we look at congestion, we look at safety, we look at access to employment. And as we score those projects, those that score the highest move into tier 2, and we work with our subcommittee to determine where that cutoff is. And then we look at kind of measuring the sustainability of the project. So we look at things like environmental justice, natural resources, historic resources, community resources that might be nearby. We look at equitable access for that particular project, as well as connectivity. And then the largest scoring bucket in the tier 2 is the benefit cost. So we look closely at that and work with our committee to do so. So just to recap all of that, what we've done so far is we've established our subcommittee. This is the Roadway Ranking Review Committee, what we're calling the R3C. We've received all of our project submissions and we've reconciled those, as in there's some cleanup we have to do to make sure we're not having duplicate submissions and coordinating between neighboring jurisdictions. A lot of you were helpful in that coordination, so thank you. Thank you if you were. We've conducted that tier 1 evaluation, so that initial step of determining the need for a particular project, and we've identified that cutoff. So we've moved a set of projects on to the second phase of evaluation, that second tier. And so that's what we're working with right now. So with the R3C, we've kind of got our sleeves rolled up. I see a few of those faces here today. So thank you guys for all your hard work again for that. We're working through cost estimations for each project. Thank you to our DOT partners for helping us through that process, making sure that we are applying those cost estimations appropriately and right sizing those. And then again, like I said, working towards that fiscal constraint here later in May. So I mentioned the R3C. The purpose for that group is essentially to provide some oversight along the process, give us some technical resources from people that are really in the know to help us score and rank and evaluate these projects. This is sort of somewhat of a quantitative process and somewhat of a qualitative process, so they help us kind of vet that evaluation as we work through it, and they help provide coordination with other jurisdictions. So we've got representatives from all over the planning area, jurisdiction representatives from all 3 counties. We also have a representation from the regional modeling team, as well as NCDOT and CRTPO staff. So here you can see all those members. And again, we appreciate you all being a part of that group. We're kind of in the thick of it right now, meeting weekly at this point. And so we definitely got our sleeves rolled up, and they're really integral to the process. So our upcoming meeting schedule for the R3C, we've gone through the initial project submissions and the tier 1 scoring. We've applied that cutoff, and now we're kind of meeting weekly at this point. We've actually added a third upcoming meeting as of yesterday. This hasn't been updated yet, on May 14th. So again, we're meeting weekly at this point to walk through these different tier 2 scores as we work towards applying a fiscal constraint. So we're hoping the last meeting in that group would be May 21st. Few weeks from now. And again, all this is working towards fiscal constraint. And so we'll receive those project submissions, we'll score those, and we'll sort those into the different STI categories. And then we'll use our financial projections, our revenue projections to understand what's available for those different STI categories, buckets, and then we'll develop that fiscally constrained project list using those revenue projections that we've determined earlier. And the plan is to bring a draft fiscally constrained project list to this group during the June meeting. All right, moving on to some upcoming items. We are getting close to our second phase of public engagement. And just to remind you kind of our overall framework for engagement, that first phase was all about understanding transportation needs for the region. What are people's perceptions of transportation needs? What would they like to see? What's important to them? What are the high level priorities? And also it's a little bit of education, right? What is the MTP? How is it beneficial for you and where you live? How does it affect the region? All that stuff is really important during that first phase of engagement. As we move into phase 2 this summer, it's all about kind of vetting our draft recommendations. And the big part of that is the draft fiscally constrained project list that we're working towards. And so as we finalize that, we'll get approval from the TCC and the board to showcase that to the public. And we're hoping to open that public comment period here later in June. And then as we'll look towards phase 3, which will be later this year, once we'll have sort of a draft version of the plan, we'll showcase that to the public. We'll ask them to validate that, vet it. Does it align with what you heard? If not, why not? You know, what do we need to change? What do we need to look closer at? And so that second phase I mentioned, our goal is to kick that off late in June. We want to highlight what we've heard in phase 1. We want to try to draw kind of a clear narrative between what we've heard from the public, how that got us to where we are now, and again, ask, did we get it right? What are we missing? What else do we need to know? We want to kind of showcase what else we've done today. We've got some other interim deliverables that are a key part of the 2055 MTP process. We'll showcase some of those. But ultimately, we want to really focus on that fiscally constrained project list. So we'll highlight that for the public and get some feedback on their thoughts. So our phase 2 activities are focused around a few different kind of pillars of engagement. Obviously, digital engagement is where we tend to get our most volume, and so we'll focus on interactive mapping and digital surveys to get feedback on these different items. You may remember during phase 1, we worked with subconsultant to conduct equity focus groups. So these are sort of targeted engagement activities for voices that may be traditionally underrepresented in a lot of planning processes. And so we've identified neighborhood groups, community leaders within each county around the region to help provide attendance to these groups and help organize and lead these along with our subconsultant and their staff, so that we can make sure we can have the opportunity for these voices to be heard in the planning process, whereas previously they may not have been. And then also we want to rely heavily on pop-up events like we did during our phase 1 as well. And so instead of holding an open house for the entire region and hope people show up, we want to try to go to people and meet them where they're at. So this means attending local festivals, and especially during the summer, there's a lot of activities like that where we can set up booths and provide QR codes that link people to digital engagement, provide education about our plan and the ongoing process. And so that'll be a big focus of our engagement here over the summer as well. And so the ask that we have of any of you is, if you know of upcoming events in your jurisdictions or communities that you think would be great for us to attend and promote the plan and to get feedback, please let us know. I know we're working with Judy and Merritt here on staff to develop that list, but we'd love to hear from you guys about what you think would be valuable for us to be in person at. So our target public comment period for this upcoming second phase of engagement would start June 19th and end July 19th. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to identify several events in that time span where we can attend. And I'm going to turn it over to Neil here to talk more about what's upcoming.
Thanks, Nat. So I've covered a lot of the roadway project evaluation. Just a reminder that this month we'll be finishing the Tier 2 evaluation for roadway projects, and we'll be applying fiscal constraint. And then preview of the June TCC meeting, we'll be here requesting action to recommend that the CRTPO board open a public comment period on the draft fiscally constrained project list. As Nat mentioned, that target public comment period would be June 19th through July 19th. So that would really be the day after the CRTPO board meeting. We would ask for them to approve the opening of the public comment period. We would start that the next day, and we'd run that for 30 days. Looking ahead, I did mention the congestion management process. We're looking to finalize the congested corridors this month with the steering and advisory committees, and then we will be presenting that information likely at a transportation staff meeting with the request for TCC members to validate strategies for reducing congestion other than adding new capacity. So that will be something that we'll be working on over the summer. I also want to mention at the Bike Ped Work Group this afternoon, we'll be talking about the active transportation corridors update. The consultant has processed the feedback from the March workshop of the Bike Ped Work Group, and we're looking for feedback based upon a vision and values statement and some metrics that we put together in response to that. And that's really the gist of our presentation today. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, you guys got off easy. And didn't give Travis enough time to walk up front. All right, next we'll hear from Travis Johnson. He's going to present information on the draft 2026-2035 TIP, MTP, and NCDOT prioritization 8.0 schedule.
Hi, everyone. Travis Johnson here. We have three major products moving forward this to finish out 2025, and the scheduling we're anticipating it might get confusing. So with us moving forward on adopting the final steps of prioritization 7.0, which will be the 2026-2035 TIP, which will also be the STIP. We'll be adopting the fiscally constrained highway project list, which Neil just brought up for the 2055 MTP. And also it is time for us to kick off the process of prioritization 8.0, which will be creating the 2028-2037 TIP. So there's gonna be a lot of opportunity for project overlap and public engagement overlap. There's also a potential for a project to be in all three lists. So we're gonna walk through the next few months and talk about some milestones that'll be in each of those months, just to make sure we're all on the same page for what 2025 looks like. I know we all enjoyed April off. We would probably not have that opportunity to take another month off for 2025. So coming up in May, we have no action on the draft TIP and STIP. Currently, we're working on getting the air quality conformity documentation finalized. We have our draft list. We have the draft TIP and STIP on our website and on NCDOT's website. There's no action currently for the 2055 MTP this month other than the information report that you received, and we're still working for the roadway project ranking review process, which Neil reviewed with you. And currently for prioritization 8.0, the TCC and the board are not going to take action this month, but we are working to update our project list for all of our modes. If you have a project that was submitted in P7 that did not get into the TIP, you've received an email from me asking for clarification if you would like for it to be considered for resubmittal in 8.0, and just confirm that the information that we received is still accurate. I'm also at the Bike Ped Work Group this afternoon. We'll be discussing project submittals for the Bike Ped projects. In June, we'll still have no action for the TIP and STIP. For the 2055 MTP, we're going to be opening the requesting approval to open a public comment period on the officially constrained project list for June 19th and July 19th. And then prioritization 8.0, again, we'll be updating those projects lists, making sure that information is correct. We'll be collecting new projects for aviation, bicycle, and pedestrian, rail, and transit. And highway projects new highway projects will be based upon their 2055 MTP project score and horizon year, which will be part of that fiscally constrained project list, which will be at that time going through public comment. In July, we'll improve the opening of the public comment on all three documents required for the 2635 TIP and STIP. And that's again, the draft TIP and STIP, the 2050 MTP amendments, and the air quality conformity determination. Any project that is in the draft STIP or TIP, we have to amend the currently adopted MTP. So while we are still working on the 2055 MTP, and that 2055 MTP will inform P8, Any project that goes beyond a horizon year in the 2050 MTP, we just have to update those years in our current adopted version. And then the future adopted 2050 MTP will also still reflect that information, but that is a necessary step in that process. The public comment period for that will be July 17th to August 16th. For the MTP, there'll be a public comment period still will be going on for the fiscally constrained project list. And then in July, the project submittal window opens for the spot online. We're also going to approve the public comment period for our project lists and go for a July 17th to July 31st public comment period. This will not be the last chance to have a project added to that list, but this is the list that we will bring forward for public feedback and comments so we can make updates and adjustments as needed. In August, we'll review public comments we received for the 2635 TIP and STIP. We'll also be coming back for the adoption of the 2055 MTP fiscally constrained project list. And then August, we'll also be asking for a recommendation for the P.0 project submittal projects for all modes. In September, we'll be coming to ask for approval of the draft 2035 TIP, the 2050 MTP amendments, and then the air quality conformity determination. There'll be no action at that time for the 2055 MTP. However, there'll be additional actions in the future as that project continues. And then by the end of September, we have to have all of our projects submitted for prioritization 8.0, and that'll conclude essentially what is called phase, or what I consider as phase 1 of the P.0 process. I also have a presentation after this presentation to go over prioritization 8.0 with you. So if you have specific prioritization 8.0 questions, I might be able to answer that in the following presentation. So again, we just have the schedules here visually shared, going over the dates that we've shared month by month. Again, calling out attention to the key deliverable dates, and then we have it mapped out completely for what we anticipate going towards October. And again, October, we still have activities for P 8.0 and the MTP, but then hopefully they'll be finalized with the prioritization or 7.0, which will then be the TIP and STIP. 2055 MTP again will continue up until 2026, in which we anticipate having the final MTP document. And then the P8 draft schedule, after we submit everything online in September, there'll be the data review and scoring portion, which will go from October until April of 2026. After that, we then apply local input points, similar to how we did for prioritization 7.0. And there'll be some modifications to that, which I'll share in my next presentation. And then we will be adopting the 2028, 2037 draft STIP in 2027. So looking towards summer of 2027 on that. So with that, I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions about the 3 project schedules.
Thank you, Travis. Anyone have questions? Go ahead.
That's a lot of overlapping comment periods.
Yes.
Is there any way of having, like you care about, you're a community member, you care about a specific project. Maybe it was in the STIP funded before, now it's only for PE, it's affected by 8.0, et cetera. Is there the ability to click on that and have the pop-up say, if this is in multiple comment periods, for example, this is, if you want to advance or you hate this project and you want to stop this project, this is the period that you care about. So it's project oriented as opposed to comment period oriented, so that you can know what you need to do to make sure that your comments are heard in the appropriate phase or process.
So the TIP comment period and the prioritization comment period will still be separate. And so while the MTP, which will overlap with the prioritization process, that will still directly inform what will be in P8. So any project where there's a concern of it being in the draft STIP or TIP and then being adopted into that process, if you didn't want it, we'll have received that feedback prior to going to the public for prioritization 8.0. And so we all have had time to talk to the member jurisdictions about resubmitting that project at that time. And then the MTP comment cycle, while it is overlapping, is a separate process. So we kind of feel like the overlapping comments, we should be able to steer everyone to the direct location. But we'll see if there is a way to consult. We feel like with overlapping information, it might get more confusing if we all have it on one map, because I can't think of a clear way to delineate between which feedback we will be then receiving the feedback on, because they are all in different time periods. But I hear your concern, and that is a concern I share about so many comment periods happening at the same time. But we think we should be able to direct people to the right location. And with the tip being, or the P7 process comment period ending prior to, or ending right before the that right? The P8. We think we're going to be able to manage it. It is confusing. It is, but we have a time frame too. We have to adopt this 7.0. We had a delay, which was beyond our control. We have to get the air quality document, and that has to be finalized. We have to get everything submitted for prioritization 8.0 by the end of September. There is no extensions, and we have a deadline where we have to adopt the MTP. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I've adjusted public comment periods many times. We have to keep the minimum 14 days. Ideally, we would have been doing 30 days. We just run out of time very quickly.
My other question is about the fact that a lot of projects in the most recent step were either shifted to PE only or got removed. Is there a scenario in P8? Like, I don't know how much money is going to be available in P8. I'm sure BUNNL don't know either, but is there a scenario of, hey, we just take P8 to make P7 whole again in terms of that previous iteration of projects that got funded?
I would share that not every funding area had negative numbers. And so we did receive statewide funding from the previous cycle. I believe there is the intention to move forward with a prioritization cycle. The projects that were unfunded will be eligible to recompete in P 8.0. So again, that is an opportunity there. But I believe we have to complete the process because not all funding categories will be negative, and they weren't negative for P 7.0. So we have to do it because there is positive values in other parts of the state. And we did receive a lot in statewide. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We did get some projects, but just telling the story of this is how much money was decommitted last time versus how much is, and we don't know how much is available next time, just to talk about whether we're actually making progress or we're treading water in the big picture. Because it seems like we aren't making progress. We just keep on getting told projects that are getting delayed or decommitted. That's it. That was my comment.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Go ahead, Dana.
So could you do me a favor? This is not in the packet, this slide. At least we couldn't find it. Could you send this out we can?
Yeah, you want a copy of the full PowerPoint or?
Yeah, or
Okay.
I mean, I particularly want this one, but if you want to send the full
Okay.
PowerPoint, that'd be great.
Yeah, and this is the same slides that were shared during the transportation staff meeting as well, but I can send it to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Steve.
To piggyback on Bjorn, not to go too much further down that rabbit hole, I share that same concern, especially with the public comment. I'm getting some comments from the few people who are plugged in my community about the CRTPO thing in general, particularly Highway 51 widening through Mint Hill, and it's the not funny joke that it keeps getting kicked. So at a minimum, be ready to talk about those and not lose our audience and then lose faith in another branch of our government, you know. Not that we need to shoulder all of that responsibility, but we can talk later about how P8 is going to happen. I too would like to see some favor given to projects that have been defunded, bumped, or whatever.
Any more questions? All right, thank you. And next up is Travis again with the draft 2028-2037 TIP process.
So we like to do this before we kick off a prioritization process is remind everyone of the steps that we go through. Typically at the end of a prioritization process is when we kick off the next one. So we're coming to the end of the P 7.0 process, which again was not typical of how the process typically runs. As that comes to a close, and there's been a few delays with that, getting some air quality documents, getting some final project lists. We still need to meet the deadline set for the prioritization 8.0 process. So we're just going to go over some of the general information for how prioritization works, what's coming up for us, and just kind of go over the first few phases, which we'll be dealing with in the next few months. So again, NCDOT prioritization 8.0 will develop the 2028-2037 TIP and is kind of the final stage in project development for projects that are intended to go to the TIP for funding. Again, it all starts with your community plans. When those are adopted, there's public engagement. Those then get added to the CTP, which then are submitted to the MTP. And then the final step is for funding. If there's not going for discretionary dollars, is to be submitted to the TIP and you go through that funding cycle. So we're going to go over the what, why, and when of NCDOT prioritization. We're going to talk about an inventory of projects to be evaluated in P8, briefly touch on local input points and how we affect project scores, and then talk about the schedule and milestones for P8, which will go from 2025 to 2027. So prioritization 8.0 is a quantitative prioritization process conducted by NCDOT to develop a statewide transportation improvement program. The results of prioritization guide funding and programming for the STIP and the TIP for a 10-year timeframe. And again, we're developing the 2837 TIP. So how and why is CRTPO involved in prioritization? In North Carolina, most funding for transportation project originates from state, federal sources. MPOs and NCDOT divisions submit projects to the Strategic Prioritization Office of Transportation, called SPOT, to be scored and prioritized. MPOs and NCDOT divisions are allowed to allocate local input points assigned to regional impact and division needs projects to affect the overall final score of those projects, affecting overall 30% of score for regional impact projects and up to 50% of score for division needs projects. And that's a way for us to show local need beyond purely a quantitative process. Prioritization started in 2009 with Governor Perdue's executive order for transportation reform, and the prioritization process has been conducted every 2 years for P6, P7, moving on to P8. So public involvement is an important part of this process. As mentioned by Bjorn, we want to make sure that it's clear. And while we have some constraints with this process due to meeting deadlines set to us, we're going to do our best to make sure everyone understands where their project is, what is the current status of it. It's important to note that in order for a project to get to this point, it has gone through public engagement multiple times. Each project is included within a local plan or CRTPO-based plan and public engagement campaign to get it to this point. If it's a highway project, then it has been added to the MTP. It's gone through separate MTP engagement before then getting added to the prioritization round, which will then add additional public engagement. A public comment period will be held during the project submission phase, which again is not the only project phase or only public engagement phase which these projects will see. Public comment periods will be held during the regional impact and division needs local input points allocation phase. And then also there will be a public comment period held during the adoption of the draft TIP and STIP, which will be the conclusion of P8. And at that time, we'll also be kicking off P9, but we won't be doing an MTP at the same time. So that'll help with a little bit with the clarity. So when thinking about prioritizations, it's thinking about in 3 main phases. So phase 1 is the phase we're in right now. That's where the prioritization work group is making recommendations to the Board of Transportation. Projects will be submitted, or projects that were submitted during previous rounds of prioritization cycles will be reviewed by NCDOT and the MPO, ensure information is correct. And these projects will be categorized as either carryover or holding tank projects when they are submitted. New projects are identified for submittal by NPO and NCDOT. Again, we have a public comment period, which again, this is tentatively scheduled for July 17th, July 31st. And project lists will be endorsed by the CRTPO board. And then by the end of September, we'll have all those projects submitted for scoring. Phase 2 of prioritization is project data review and scoring. Projects are sorted into 3 separate types: statewide, regional impact, or division needs. NCDOT and NPOs conducted a review of the data to ensure information was submitted correctly. NCDOT will then score the projects, applying a quantitative score to the three modes. But then NPOs have the ability to apply local input points to the regional impact and division needs categories based upon an approved methodology. And then those local points affect the overall score for projects in those categories. And again, for each allocation, we will have public engagement and an endorsement for the local point allocation by the CRTPO board. The final phase is what we're doing for prioritization 7.0, which will happen for P8, which is then we review the draft tip and stip, review project information. We have to identify any modifications necessary for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, because if the years of which construction go beyond the horizon year originally set up in the MTP, you have to delay those years. We also then create an air quality conformity determination. Again, there'll be additional public engagement and then adoption by the Board of Transportation and endorsement by the CRTPO board. So again, a lot of these projects have many different points of public engagement, and there'll be many opportunities for us to receive feedback. This is again the same schedule you saw previously, showing that we're here in May. We're still in the process where the Board of Transportation has yet to receive the recommendations from the work group, and they're still working to come up with recommendations and changes to the process. We will note a couple of those recommended changes which have not been finalized, but things that we can anticipate as we get ready for P8. And again, just kind of going through the first two phases we see here. For phase one, for getting our projects submitted, and phase two for evaluation and applying local input points. And then beyond the schedule is the release of the draft 2028-2037 STIP and TIP, which will start the review process for that, which is the phase three. So projects that are submitted for prioritization are separated into three separate funding categories. They're either statewide mobility. These are projects such as interstates, regional impact projects, such as NC and US routes, and then division needs projects. These are projects that are not selected in regional categories and division local priorities. For statewide, 40% of the funds go to these projects that are available in the prioritization process. And this is projects competing across the entire state. So when we submit projects, we're competing against Wilmington, we're competing against Raleigh, we're competing against Asheville. Regional impact projects, each region receives a portion of funds based upon their overall population. So we have two regions in our planning area, Region E and Region F. Region E is Union and Mecklenburg County, Region F being Iredell County. And then for division needs, we have two separate divisions as we have them sitting here with us. And so Division 10 is Mecklenburg and Union, and Division 12 is Iredell County. So going into the total project score breakdown, 100% of the score comes from the quantitative process set by the spot office. And so we receive the list of projects from the state office once we get the projects back after we submit them, and we see what their score is. Projects not selected in the statewide tier can then cascade down to regional impact, and then we have the ability to add local input points with the NCDOT division of which is located. And this affects a total 30% of the score, but with the NPO affecting 15% of that score and the division affecting the other 15%. And then the division needs half the score comes from that quantitative process. And then 25% of the score comes from our local input points, and 25% comes from division's local input points. The criteria considered is economic competitiveness, safety, freight, travel time, benefit costs, and congestion. And again, those sections reduce as we start adding in the local input points to the overall 100% total project score. So inventory of projects to be evaluated in P8. Projects submitted for prioritization in P8 will fit into one of the three following subcategories. So we have our carryover projects, our holding tank projects, and then new projects, meaning they weren't in a previous prioritization round. Carryover projects are automatically evaluated in the next cycle and do not count towards our submittal allotment. They have to be in the current STIP but not selected for delivery, which is the last 5 years of the draft STIP, have completed or have an active environmental document, or they are siblings of a programmed project. So when you see a sub-project of a 534A, 534B, or those would then be sibling projects, and they would automatically recompete. Any committed projects scheduled for delivery that are currently included in the 2024-2030 STIP as of January 1st would also have been counted, but as of the time, there have not been a project that met that requirement. Holding tank projects were submitted during the previous prioritization cycle, but they do not qualify as a carryover project. So we have the option to choose to resubmit those, but then as we submit a holding tank project that does take up a submittal slot, and we have a limited number of those that we can use. For highway projects, new highway projects are based upon their MTP horizon year and then their MTP score. So if a project is not in the MTP, then it would not be submitted by the CRTPO into prioritization 8.0. And we're going to be selecting based upon the draft 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan fiscally constrained project list. Or if we have available new highway slots. For non-highway, including aviation, bicycle, pedestrian, rail, and transit, the requests are being made by the member organizations, typically affect these. So we talk to the airports for aviation, we talk to the transit partners for rail and transit. And then for bicycle and pedestrian, we'll be working with the bicycle and pedestrian work group. We have the first meeting scheduled this afternoon, and we'll have another meeting scheduled the following month to talk about previously submitted projects and potential for new projects or new project ability. So again, thinking about this visually, again, last 5 years from P7, carryover, sibling, our project's planning's underway, that's carryover. And then if it's not in the STIP, then it would either count as a holding tank project. And then if we have available slots afterwards, then we submit those as new project entries. So let's hit a slide. One potential change that has been identified is a reduction in overall submittal slots from previous prioritization cycles. So I believe the current number is 34 is what is being proposed for prioritization 8.0. And this proposal is out of a desire to more accurately reflect the reasonable amount of projects that we have the ability to fund through the prioritization process. So we're looking at a potential for a lower number of project submittals for all modes. So after projects are all submitted, they are ranked. We then have the opportunity to apply local input points. The SCI legislation requires each MPO to use a methodology to assign points based upon a quantitative data and qualitative input and model allocation. Local input allocation assignment can be adjusted based upon the results of public input, and the adjustments that vary from methodology must provide a justification to do so. We receive our number of local input points based upon our population, and we can allocate no more than 100 local input points to a project. According to our methodology, projects that must have a reasonable chance to be funded. We have to assign the maximum points of eligible projects. Points from division needs tier should not be applied to unfunded statewide mobility projects. And we coordinate with the divisions to achieve mutual point assignment. Again, for the regional impact and division needs, where it's 30 or 50% of the total score. If we apply points and the division does not, and there's an opportunity for us to combine those points, we then have a better chance of getting that project funded. And then, of course, the board may divert for recommended lists based upon public comment. So currently we have 2,500 points for regional impact and 2,500 division needs local input points. From what I understand, the work group is recommending a change to the overall number of points that will be allowed. So as soon as I get a finalized number, I'll share that information with everyone. But again, that's tied to the overall desire to reduce the number of points available and the submittal slots available to more align with the amount of projects that are being funded through the process. So we assign local input points using the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So again, we would use the 2055 MTP. We assign it based upon horizon year and score. And then we use the P8.0 score for if there are any remaining local input points. And then for non-highway projects, the highest ranked project will typically then receive the local input point for each mode. And then typically we have one allotment left, and then we'll go to the second highest rated or local input point project, or second highest rated project will then receive local input points. So this typically means an additional rail or bike ped project might receive local input points. The reason why this process is not as involved as the highway version is typically we only get one project for each mode, due to this being the 10% of the total funds that are available. And that 10% is split up among all of the non-highway modes. So April, May, we're going to be assembling the mode subcommittees and identify project submittals. May, we're providing general updates to the TCC and the board. June, we're going to finalize our project submittals for all modes. July, we anticipate a public comment period. August, we'll have our recommended list for projects. And again, in September, we have to have every project submitted into Spot Online to start the prioritization process. again, moving to phase 2 where we assign local input points and getting scores. So starting in October, we'll get the scoring process will start and we'll clean up the data. June through December, we'll be assigning local input points in 2026, and then going to 2027, calculating the final scores. And then we're looking to summer of 2027 to see the draft 2028, 2037 STIP to be released. So with that, I can answer any questions you have here. If you come up with any questions later, I'll be more than willing to answer those questions as well.
Thank you, Travis. Questions? Go ahead, Heather.
The methodology for applying local points,
Yes.
is that dictated by the Board of Transportation at the state level, or is that something that we develop? And
We developed our local input point allocation, which was adopted by the CRTPO board. It's important to also note that that also needs to align with how projects are selected in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
right. And, you know, I was on the
Yeah.
local allocation, and we had a lot of questions during that
Yeah.
time. About when was this approved and what is the process? Will there be an opportunity before P 8.0 and the allocation of local points for us to like better understand that and understand it at a point where we may have input on it? Just so it's not just like, oh, it's been approved, it's been approved,
Yeah.
it's been approved, and we're just kind of steamrolling right through it.
Right.
And I guess my question is, when does that occur? And what opportunity can we create for that
Right.
type of
And so,
understanding and involvement?
Yeah. So I'll talk with the rest of the CRTPO staff to find out a way to update or talk about the local input point allocation. Again, a lot of the metrics are set by the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which everyone had a hand in updating or participating with as part of that process. So that Metropolitan Transportation Plan is so important to the TIP because that directly dictates where that's coming from. So our goal is not to then recreate a second process when we've spent all the time on the MTP, but I'll talk with Neil and the rest of the staff about opening this up and talking about where some of the steps
No,
have
I'm
come
not
from.
looking to recreate it. I think it's just important that we understand it and are involved at a point where we can have meaningful input in it, rather than it always feels like by the time we understand it, we're told that now's not the point to change it. So I'm just asking when that type of meaningful input could and should occur.
I think this answered my question and probably in the presentation, but we highway projects, 8.0, they come directly from the MTP.
Yes.
Is that around the current MTP?
No.
Right.
Whatever will be in the draft 2055 MTP fiscally constrained project list will be the list. So that, as Neil presented on earlier, so we are currently creating that list by doing the tier 2 evaluation. We're going to go to public comment on that on June 19th to July 19th. So then that'll come back for adoption in August. So we are going to use the draft list. We have till September to submit everything. So assuming that it moves forward in August, then that would be the draft list if we have submittal slots. That'll be the draft NTP list, and then we would use those horizon years and scores to select new projects to submit. I don't know how many submittal slots we will have for new projects after we account for holding tank projects. Because as we brought up before, a lot of projects fell out of prioritization that do not qualify as carryover projects. So holding tank projects count towards our overall submittal, and we are reducing the number of projects we may submit. But the new projects, if there are available slots, would come from that draft fiscally constrained project list, which is part of the 2055 MTP, which would be hopefully planned to be adopted in August, which will then still align up with us submitting projects in September, which is the deadline. Yeah.
A little window.
Yeah. Correct.
More of a comment, but just from experience from what we just went through with P7, I know as far as the cascading and allocating local points for those, we've always been kind of on the standpoint of picking like arbitrary value numbers, whether to cascade or not, and kind of use that. And when we got to the board level, I remember it kind of got abused a little bit by some of the board member comments. So I know we're a ways down the road from that standpoint, but this might be something we want to look into before we get there again and kind of tighten that up a bit.
Yep. I think I'll tie that into Heather's comment as well about looking to update what we can.
Just one question on the, I guess, the when per se, and you may not have this answer now. So when will we know how much funding is actually available within P8? And the reason why I asked that question is because it goes back to P7 where there was millions of dollars that we could not achieve for various projects, and that led to various projects being either A, decommitted, or B, delayed, which is not progressing these projects. So from going back to Steve's point, you know, the NC 51 widening, NC 16 widening for our area, these projects have been committed for a long time. So a lot of our engaged citizens ask us, you know, when can we realistically expect these projects? And the answer has consistently been, well, unfortunately, due to X, Y, and Z, we've had to delay these projects. But just to help them understand is, you know, when would be the when where we would actually know realistically how much funding is available within P8?
I've not been shared that information. I understand it's been requested multiple times. Some point during the prioritization process, we will receive those estimates.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? So I'll restate it a little bit differently. This summer is very important for this work. So stay tuned and pay attention. Any more questions for Travis? One last opportunity. All right, thank you, Travis. Okay, moving into our last item, we have other reports. As always, included in your agenda packet are project updates for Division 10 and Division 12. Both Theo and Anil are here with us today. If you have any questions for them, grab them after the meeting. No additional NCDOT reports from other members. So we'll move into Curtis. Do you have an update for us? You pointed.
Yeah,
Do I have something to read?
Yeah, he's just gonna say.
No real update. You heard from Neil this morning or just earlier about our active transportation corridor agenda item this afternoon, and we'll hear from the esteemed Travis Johnson about P 8.0 also this afternoon. That's all I've got. And happy Bike Month.
Thank you. All right, next we'll hear from Jennifer Stafford.
Happy Bike Month. So if you have a discretionary funded program or a project, or if you're looking to apply for funds, we're holding a workshop next Tuesday from 9:30 to 3. NCDOT will be here with several presenters to go over project delivery. I've sent out a couple emails now with the registration link. If you haven't already registered and you're interested, please fill out that link. You can participate in person or remotely. We will record the session. If you're in person, we need a head count for ordering lunch. So make sure you register for that. And let me check my notes real quick. I think that's it. Unless there's any questions, we'll hopefully see most of you next Tuesday.
Go ahead, Heather.
Yep.
May 6th, is that right?
Yeah. Tuesday. Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We covered a ton of information today. I'm going to pause for a minute and see if anybody has any burning questions or comments before we break, because we are ending a few minutes early. All right, hearing silence from the group. As always, thank you for your time and participation in the important work that we do in planning for transportation in the region. And we have completed all items on our agenda. We are adjourned.